1,500 hours. A gloved hand withdrew from a tangle of wiring hidden above the ceiling, and somewhere inside 40,000 hand-cut crystals of the Aurora Imperial Hotel's grand chandelier, a small red light began to blink. Below it, 300 of the wealthiest people in Seoul laughed, danced, and raised champagne glasses beneath the very thing that would kill them if nobody stopped it in time. Only one person in that ballroom felt it. A faint, wrong sway in the chandelier, though every window was sealed and the air conditioning had been off for hours. A young woman in a plain navy dress, standing quietly near the translation booth, tilted her head toward the ceiling for exactly 1 second. She had no idea what she was looking at yet. In 15 minutes, she would either save every person in that room or die trying to. Welcome to Story Nest Tales. If you're new here, like, subscribe and comment, because I promise you this is not the story you think it is. Stay with us to the end. 8 hours earlier, Sofia Petrova sat at her kitchen table, staring at another rejection email. 28 years old, fluent in Korean, English, Swahili, Japanese, and French, and still, somehow, never quite qualified enough. Not for recruiters who hesitated the moment they saw her face, not for clients who preferred someone more traditional, not even for the agency that had promised her a permanent contract last spring and quietly gave it to someone else instead. She had stopped counting the rejections a long time ago. Counting them only made the ache sharper. Her phone rang. She almost let it go to voicemail. Miss Petrova, this is Aurora Imperial Hotel Event Coordination. Our chief interpreter for tonight's Global Unity Charity Gala just collapsed. We need a replacement in 2 hours. Your name came back as the most qualified interpreter available in Seoul tonight. Sofia looked at the rejection email still glowing on her screen, then closed the laptop. I can be there in 90 minutes, she said. I'll be there. She hung up, her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar, the kind she'd learned not to trust too quickly. She had no idea that one phone call would put her in a room with a bomb, a billionaire, and a man who had spent years planning to kill them both. The Aurora Imperial glittered like something from a dream. Luxury cars gliding to the curb, photographers shouting for attention, security guards scanning every face with quiet precision. Sofia arrived by taxi with nothing but a laptop bag and a notebook, and stepped onto the red carpet in a simple navy dress that made more than one head turn. Not with admiration, but confusion. Excuse me, a woman in gold sequins said, not bothering to look at her face. Can you take these glasses? They're empty. I'm the interpreter for tonight's gala, Sofia said evenly. The woman gave an awkward laugh and walked off without apologizing. Moments later, a security guard at the door asked to see her badge twice, longer than he'd checked anyone else's, before waving her through with visible reluctance. It wasn't the first time tonight. It wouldn't be the last. Near the coat check, a group of 3 young executives in matching tuxedos noticed her badge and burst into quiet laughter. They really let anyone hold a microphone these days. One of them murmured, not quite quietly enough. Sofia's cheeks warmed, but she kept walking, her spine straight, her notebook held a little tighter against her chest. She had learned long ago that dignity wasn't something anyone could hand her or take away. Miss Petrova? Sofia turned and found herself face to face with Chairman Kim Woo-jin, 41 years old, founder of the Myri Harmony Foundation, one of the most respected businessmen in the country. Chairman didn't personally greet last-minute interpreters. Several executives nearby exchanged confused, almost offended glances. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Kim said, and meant it. Thank you for having me, Sofia replied, bowing slightly. I understand your usual interpreter is unwell. I hope she recovers quickly. So do I, Kim said. Though something tells me tonight needed you specifically. He had no idea how right he was. Behind the stage, while testing her equipment, Sofia noticed a panel of wiring that didn't match any standard audio setup. Thicker cable, run at an angle no technician would choose for sound. A maintenance worker in gray coveralls closed the panel quickly, refusing to meet her eyes. Just fixing something, he muttered. With respect, Sofia said, I only wanted to check the microphone feed wasn't affected by whatever you're running through here. He didn't answer. He simply walked away, faster than the task required. She said nothing more. But she memorized the small scar above his left eyebrow, and the way his hands shook. The gala began at 8, and within minutes Sofia was in the deep end. 6 languages. Overlapping voices, multimillion-dollar negotiations balanced on the edge of a single misplaced word. She caught a Japanese investor's hesitation and softened his phrasing without changing his meaning. She turned a French ambassador's dry joke into something the whole table laughed at instead of misunderstood. An elderly Kenyan diplomat, visibly nervous in a room full of louder, wealthier voices, fumbled over a sentence about his country's education fund. Sofia leaned toward him before anyone could notice his hesitation and murmured, in gentle Swahili, "Take your time. I have every word you need." His shoulders relaxed. When he spoke again, his proposal landed with the confidence of a man twice his seniority, and 2 investors at the table nodded in genuine respect. He caught Sofia's eye afterward and mouthed a quiet "Asante." "Thank you." She only smiled. Chairman Kim watched her from across the room, quietly stunned. Then a senior delegate spoke a single sentence about contract terms, and the official transcript displayed on the screen said something else entirely. Not similar, different. A change that quietly redirected millions of dollars in humanitarian funding toward an account nobody in the room had approved. "Excuse me," Sofia said into the microphone, calm and precise. "There's an error in the transcript. The correct translation is..." She repeated it exactly, word for word. The room went silent. The delegate who'd spoken looked startled, then furious, rounding on the man beside him. "That is not what I said. Who authorized this transcript?" Near the back, the assistant interpreter responsible for that transcript slipped his hand into his pocket and stepped quietly into the shadows before anyone thought to ask him directly. Security Chief Lee Sung-ho approached Kim minutes later, his voice low and clipped. "Chairman, a guest badge was duplicated at the east entrance 20 minutes ago. Cameras in the service corridor lost signal for 90 seconds. An unidentified technician entered the restricted floor above us. No maintenance was scheduled tonight." "Do they connect?" Kim asked. "Not yet," Lee said. "I don't believe in coincidences. Not 3 in one night." Across the ballroom, Sofia caught sight of the same maintenance worker from earlier, except now he wore a different uniform entirely, a caterer's jacket instead of gray coveralls, moving through the crowd with practiced ease. For a single second, their eyes met. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd near the kitchen doors, gone before she could reach Lee. Sofia approached Lee cautiously. "Chief Lee, I may have seen something relevant. A maintenance worker behind the stage. Wiring that didn't belong there. He's here again, in a different uniform." Lee's eyes narrowed, not with interest but suspicion. "This isn't your concern, Miss Petrova. Focus on your interpreting. With respect, I'm only trying to help. Everyone in this hotel is only trying to help tonight," Lee said coldly, and walked away before she could answer. It stung more than she expected. But an hour later, she noticed something strange about Lee himself. He kept vanishing into the stairwell for private phone calls, his voice dropping to a hush whenever anyone came near. Once, passing him in a corridor, she caught him folding a photograph back into his jacket pocket before she could see it clearly. Another time, she watched him quietly pull a hotel staffer aside near the kitchen doors, speaking too fast and too low for her to catch more than a single word. Tonight, she finally caught him alone near the stairwell and didn't hold back. "Chief Lee, you question everyone in this hotel, and yet you disappear every 20 minutes for calls you won't explain. If something is happening here, hiding it from Chairman Kim's own interpreter helps no one." Lee's expression didn't soften. "You don't know what you're asking me to risk. Then tell me what you're protecting," Sofia said. "Instead of who you're protecting it from." He didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away, leaving her with the same cold, uncomfortable thought she'd carried for the last hour. A man that's suspicious of everyone else, she thought, and yet so secret of himself. What is he hiding? She didn't say it aloud. Not yet. But the thought sat with her, cold and uncomfortable, for the rest of the night. If you think you already know who the real threat is, drop your guess in the comments before we get to the reveal. Most people get this one wrong. Chairman Kim pulled Sofia aside during a brief recess. I'd like you to stay close to me for the rest of the evening. Officially, you're translating. Unofficially, I'd value another pair of observant eyes. Chairman Kim, I'm only an interpreter. Tonight, he said gently, you're the only person in this room who has caught two things everyone else missed. That is not only anything. That is invaluable. Most people who look at me decide what I am before I say a single word, Sofia admitted. You haven't done that once tonight. Then most people are making a very expensive mistake, Kim said. And for the first time all evening, Sofia allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Passing a service corridor sometime later, Sofia overheard fragments of a conversation drifting through a half-open door, spoken in overlapping Korean, English, and Japanese. 15 minutes after the keynote. The east stairwell will be clear by then. Once it drops, no one will be looking anywhere else. Alone, the words meant nothing. Together, in three languages only she could fully connect, they described a schedule, a location, an attack. She found Lee near a supply closet moments later and told him everything, word for word. This time, he didn't dismiss her. He pulled the closet door open himself, and together they searched it in tense silence. A stack of guest badges duplicated down to the hologram, 2 staff uniforms still smelling of fresh dye, and a small black box humming faintly with static that Lee immediately recognized as a signal jammer. This isn't sabotage, Lee muttered, turning the jammer over in his hands, his composure cracking for the first time all night. This is a siege dressed up as a charity gala, and we've all been standing inside it for hours. Then it's already begun, Sofia said quietly. She found Kim and Lee together minutes later, her voice shaking. They're not just stealing something. I think this is an assassination, and I think it's happening tonight in this room. Lee's jaw tightened. He hesitated for one long second, then opened a laptop and pulled up a folder, the same one Sofia had seen him hide in his jacket earlier. Financial records. Wire transfers. Weeks of quiet surveillance he'd clearly been running alone, without telling anyone. You've been keeping this from us? Sofia said, unable to hide the edge in her voice. I've been keeping this from everyone, Lee said quietly, because the tip came from an informant inside this hotel, someone terrified of being found. A junior staffer who came to me 3 weeks ago, shaking, saying she'd seen documents she wasn't supposed to see. People who've talked before have disappeared from this company's orbit. Every call you saw me take was me making sure she was still safe tonight. I wasn't hiding a conspiracy, Miss Petrova. I was protecting the only person brave enough to whisper the truth to me, in a building full of people who'd rather look away. Sofia felt a wave of shame and then relief. She had been wrong about him. Lee wasn't the danger. He'd been fighting it alone, quietly, the entire night, and she had nearly accused him of the opposite. I'm sorry, she said. I judged you the same way I've spent my whole life being judged. Then we're even, Lee said, something almost like respect in his voice for the first time all night. Don't do it again, and neither will I. Then who is the informant pointing to? Kim asked. Lee turned the laptop toward them. A single name glowed on a shell company's registration papers, dated 6 weeks earlier. Richard Hawthorne. Before anyone could react, a man in a staff uniform Sofia didn't recognize stepped directly into her path near the corridor exit, blocking it. You should have stayed at your booth translating, he said, low and cold, close enough that she could smell cigarette smoke on his jacket. Some conversations aren't meant to be understood. Sofia's heart slammed against her ribs, but she didn't step back. Then you shouldn't have had them where a translator could hear. Lee moved fast, wedging himself between them before the man could react, and within seconds 2 more security officers had him pinned against the wall. Sofia's hands were shaking again. Not the trembling hope of that morning's phone call, but something colder. She understood. For the first time all night, exactly how much danger she was standing inside of Hartsuit. It didn't make sense at first. Hawthorne, the internationally celebrated philanthropist who had personally organized tonight's entire gala, had been the one to alert Lee about the duplicated badge 2 hours earlier, practically insisting security investigate it at once. He came to me first, Lee admitted, frowning. He seemed like he wanted this caught. Sofia thought back to a moment near the champagne fountain, hours earlier, when Hawthorne had leaned toward her with his easy, magazine cover smile. "You must be the replacement everyone's talking about," he'd said. Asterisk, "Some things are better left untranslated. Don't you think?" Asterisk, she had smiled politely and said nothing. Now the comment sat in her memory like a blade. "Or," she said slowly, the pieces sliding into place, "he wanted you looking at a badge, so nobody looked at him." Kim's face went pale. Lee's team moved to detain Hawthorne quietly, without alarming the guests. But when they reached his table, his chair sat empty, his champagne still fizzing gently beside a folded napkin. Richard Hawthorne was gone. Chairman Kim found Sofia by a window minutes later, her composure finally beginning to crack. Her hands were still shaking from the corridor. "I've spent my whole life being judged before anyone listened," she whispered. "Tonight, for the first time, someone actually listened. And now I wish more than anything I was wrong about everything I heard." "You weren't wrong," Kim said. "Not once tonight. Not about the wiring, not about the transcript, not about any of it." "What if I'm wrong about what happens next?" Kim was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll be wrong together. But I don't think we will be. People who only notice appearances rarely notice the truth. Tonight you have proven the truth was never hidden. It was only waiting for someone brave enough and skilled enough to hear it." There was no time left for the moment to linger. Sofia noticed it then, the chandelier swaying almost imperceptibly, though the air in the ballroom was still and every window sealed. She remembered the wiring behind the stage. Every piece connected at once like a sentence finally translated correctly. Security found it within minutes, through a maintenance hatch far from the guest's view. Military-grade explosives wired directly into the chandelier's support frame, enough to bring down the entire ceiling and kill nearly everyone beneath it. A small digital timer blinked quietly among the wires. 04:52. Evacuating 300 guests now could trigger it instantly, if anyone loyal to Hawthorne was still watching. So Chairman Kim walked back onto the small stage, smiling warmly, welcoming his guests as though nothing in the world was wrong. The orchestra kept playing. Waiters kept pouring champagne. Nobody looked up. There were less than 5 minutes left. Bomb technicians worked with flashlights and trembling hands, but every wire they identified as the obvious disconnect accelerated the timer instead of stopping it. 03:15. "It's rigged to punish tampering," one technician whispered, sweat sliding down his temple. "Every wrong guess speeds it up." Sofia pushed forward, staring not at the wires but at a laminated strip of handwritten Korean notes taped beside the circuit board. At a glance, it looked like standard technical instruction. But the grammar was subtly wrong. Wrong in a way no native technician would ever write it. "Wait," she said sharply. "These aren't technical instructions. They're mistranslated. Deliberately. With respect, miss," the lead technician snapped, sweat in his eyes. "I've handled devices like this. The board doesn't lie. The board doesn't," Sofia shot back. "But whoever wrote this note did. This word should mean secondary. Structured this way, it implies the opposite. It's built to trick anyone reading quickly into cutting the primary trigger, believing it's safe." "Listen to her," Kim said, low and unshakable. The technician's hand hovered over the wire he'd originally planned to cut. Sofia grabbed his wrist before he could move it. "Not that one," she said. "Please. I need you to trust me the way no one has all night." He looked at her for a long second, then withdrew his hand. 02:00. At the edge of the stage, a man stepped out of the shadows. Jang Min-suk, former executive, his composed mask finally slipping into raw, years-old fury. "You destroyed my career, Kim," he said. "My reputation. My family disowned me because of what you exposed. I exposed the truth, Kim said. You built the lie yourself. Maybe, Zhang said, his voice cracking. But truth doesn't pay rent, Kim. Truth doesn't get you a second chance in this country. Hawthorne found me 2 years ago when I had nothing left. He didn't offer me sympathy. He offered me a way to matter again. Tonight I take everything from you, starting with everyone in this room who ever respected you. And it was his money that made every second of it possible. You could have walked away, Kim said quietly. Even tonight you still could. Zhang said nothing. For a moment, something like doubt flickered across his face. And then it was gone, buried beneath 2 years of rehearsed hatred. 01:00. Li subdued the last of Zhang's operatives near a service exit while guards quietly guided elderly dignitaries toward the far end of the ballroom under the excuse of a photography session, buying precious seconds without alerting the wider crowd. Sofia's fingers moved with careful precision, tracing exactly what the broken grammar had, unintentionally, revealed. Every year of studying 5 languages, every rejection she'd swallowed in silence, had led her to this exact circuit board, in this exact ballroom at this exact second. 00:30. Talk to me. Li's voice crackled through a radio. What do you need? 00:20. I need everyone to stop touching anything, Sofia said, steady despite everything. And I need 1 more second of silence. 00:10. 00:05. ***. Beneath layers of deliberate deception, she found the true trigger, hidden beneath the fake one, and disconnected it. Silence. The countdown froze at 00:03, unmoving, as though the entire ballroom had exhaled at once. She did it? Li breathed, disbelief cracking his voice. She actually did it. Zhang Minsuk was arrested at the stage, his defiance finally collapsing into resignation. As officers led him away, he looked back once at Chairman Kim, and for a moment the fury drained out of his face, leaving only exhaustion behind. Richard Hawthorne was caught minutes later in the underground parking garage, one hand still on his car door. This is a misunderstanding, he told the officers, flashing the same magazine cover smile that had fooled a room full of billionaires all night. I organized this gala. I raised the alarm about the badge myself. You raised the alarm about a badge, Li said, stepping into view. So nobody would look at the wire transfers underneath it. Hawthorne's smile finally failed him. He said nothing more as they led him away. Investigators would spend the following year unraveling years of fraud, corruption, and manipulation stretching across 3 countries, all financed by a man the world had once called a hero. The same guests who had mistaken Sofia for catering staff hours earlier now stared at her in silence, some visibly ashamed. The woman in gold sequins who had handed her empty glasses at the door lowered her eyes and said nothing at all. Chairman Kim stepped onto the stage once more. Tonight, this gala was not saved by wealth or titles or power. It was saved by a woman some of you dismissed within minutes of meeting her. A woman whose courage, intelligence, and integrity proved greater than every person who ever underestimated her. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Sofia Petrova. The ballroom rose in a thunderous, tearful standing ovation. Somewhere near the back, even the young executives who had laughed at her by the coat check were on their feet. Sofia stood there, overwhelmed, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Not from fear this time, but from something she had waited her entire life to feel. Recognition, respect, belonging. Lee Sung-ho stayed on as head of security for the foundation, and the two of them developed an unlikely friendship built on that single night. A mutual respect neither had expected to find in a hotel corridor. He never did tell her the informant's full name. Some promises, he said, were worth keeping forever. Months later, Sofia walked into the Myri Harmony Foundation not as a temporary replacement, but as chief interpreter and senior advisor for international cultural relations, requested by name at diplomatic tables across Asia and Africa. Governments sought her expertise. Universities asked her to lecture on the power of language, observation, and quiet courage. At a foundation gala almost a year to the day after that night, One of the same young executives who had laughed at her near the coat check approached her table, hand extended, all trace of mockery gone from his face. "Miss Petrova, it's an honor. I don't know if you remember me." "I remember everyone," Sofia said simply, and shook his hand. Sometimes, late at night, she still thought back to that small kitchen table, the glowing rejection email, the trembling phone call that changed everything. She never forgot where she came from. She simply refused to let it define where she was going. The gift she had spent a lifetime being told wasn't valuable enough had, in the end, been the only thing standing between 300 people and a countdown that never should have started. Never underestimate someone because of how they look, where they come from, or what others assume about them. Sometimes the quietest person in the room, the one everyone was wrong about first, is the only one paying enough attention to save it. If the story kept you glued until the end, hit like, subscribe to Story Nest Tales, and tell us in the comments. Did you guess Hawthorne? Or did Lee have you fooled too? We'll see you in the next story.